Kid Rock, and that is Governor Mitt Romney's campaign song. I don't know if you're sick of that song yet, Governor, but that's how we're bringing you in, like we bring you to, and that's how you bring yourself in a lot of events, right?
No question about that. It's a great song, Born Free.
And he says you can go ahead and use it. Governor, welcome back. I got to get your take on this Obama budget. It is just being ripped from pillar to post, even by some Democrats who don't even want the embarrassment of voting for it. First off, as a guy who prides yourself on your economic knowledge, what does this do for the country going forward if it passes?
Well, of course, it won't pass, and it wasn't designed to pass. It's designed to be a campaign document. It adds another $1 trillion to our debt, and we're getting to a point where the world is going to ask whether buying American debt makes sense or not. And of course, we're passing on massive burdens to our kids. It also fails to address in any way whatsoever the extraordinary shortfall coming up in Medicare and Social Security. We need to protect those programs. The president doesn't address it, and of course, he looks at various savings such as a conclusion of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, but doesn't note that we've been borrowing to pay for those things, and the idea that he's going to take that money and start spending it elsewhere is another. It's just a phantom savings. It's very frustrating to watch a president stoop to the point of creating a budget which is unrealistic and which if it were passed would place enormous burdens on coming generations.
You know, his mantra is he wants the rich to pay their fair share, and he wants everyone to be rich, but they got to pay their fair share. He also plans on raising taxes on capital gains to 30% from 15%, dividends from 15% to 30%, and the estate tax 10 points from 35 to 45%. First off, on capital gains, if you double it, what does that do to investors?
Well, there's no question, but the capital gains change he's referring to and the other tax changes he's proposing would slow down our economy. I mean, it's the reason we tax capital gains at a lower rate than we do the other sources of income is twofold. First, it's already been taxed once at the corporate level at 35%. So it's a double taxation, so we're keeping it a little lower, recognizing that. And secondly, we want individuals and businesses and others to invest in capital so that we build new facilities, that we put more people to work. The whole idea is getting the economy growing, and raising the capital gains tax rate would only slow down the economy and keep more people out of jobs.
Governor, you know the reality of politics as well as anybody. You ran for the Senate, you ran for governor, you ran for president. If you're president, like President Obama right now in year 3, and you know that Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid have to be reformed, but you know you're going to alienate a huge part of the voting public if you do so. For example, telling everyone you're going to raise the retirement age. For example, in Medicaid, turning the money over to the states in block grants to allow them to decide how it's going to go. You know you could lose large swaths of the voting public. Would you have the courage to do that?
The answer is, of course. The challenge is we have a president, and it's true frankly, for a heck of a lot of people who go to Washington who are more concerned about their reelection and about their party and about power than they are about the country. Now, they don't think of it that way, but the reality is if you're not willing to deal with making sure that Social Security and Medicare are solvent permanently and they don't crush the country with debt down the road, if you're concerned about those things and recognize them, you've got to address them as opposed to pretending that they're not there. You can't keep adding trillion-dollar deficits and make proposals that will kill our economy simply for political purpose. And that's what happens. People go to Washington, they get this disease, and they want to stay in Washington the rest of their life. I don't understand it. If I get there, like I hope, I'll serve my time and then go home because I like being home with my family more than I like being in Washington.
Right. Governor Mitt Romney, of course, our guest. He also projects growth to be at 4%. Governor, back to the race for a second. This is the last lull you'll have. And I know you're working hard during it. Arizona and Michigan are going to be the next 2 times we get a chance to, and of course a debate before that. In Michigan, the latest poll has you trailing in your home state, where 2 weeks ago you were up 15. What's going on?
Well, there's a lot of bouncing around, of course, in the polls, and then when we actually get down to the voting, things tend to solidify a bit. So, I was down by 5 or 10 points in Florida to Newt Gingrich, and then we ended up winning by I think something like 10 points. And so we're going to work very hard. My guess is, as people take a very close look, I'll be able to get the support I need. I'm in Arizona today, and I sure hope and expect to be able to get support from the people here. And I'd like to be able to get a lot of delegates in Michigan. I hope to win in Michigan. I think I will, but we have to get there and do the kind of campaigning and advertising and if you will, city to city events that convince people that I'm the right guy to get the country going again.
Here's what Rick Santorum said about your CPAC straw poll victory over the weekend. Listen.
For years, Ron Paul has won those because he just trucks in a lot of people, pays for their ticket, and they come in and vote, and then they leave. I don't try to rig straw polls. You have talked the Romney campaign and how many tickets they buy. We've heard all sorts of things.
So he basically thinks you rigged the CPAC poll.
Well, does he have any evidence of that, by the way? The answer is, of course, not. Our participation in CPAC and other polls is the same as in other years, and it's kind of silly on his part. But, sometimes when you lose, you cast about looking for excuses. The reality is, by the way, there was not only a CPAC poll taken of the people sitting there, they had a CPAC internet poll of conservatives across the country. So I'm afraid sour grapes and having lost has generated some unusual places to blame.
Governor, do you think after the momentum of winning in Nevada and Florida, do you think you look past Missouri, Michigan, and Colorado, and do you regret that?
You mean Missouri, Minnesota,
Minnesota,
and Colorado?
Yes. Sure.
Well, in each case, they were not elections where delegates were going to be selected, and we were looking at races where we wanted to pick up delegates. This is, after all, a contest to get 1,150 delegates or so to become the nominee, and we did focus on Florida and on Nevada. Very anxious to get the delegates from those places and secured them, and we'll be coming back, by the way, to Minnesota, Missouri, and Colorado when the delegate process goes on, so we can get delegates. That's part of the process. I wish we'd have picked up those states, but we didn't. But we're planning on coming back and getting delegates when they select delegates.
Governor, you and Rick Santorum have not been really going at it in the debates. It's going to be a little different next time because he's really risen in the polls. Where do you see yourself totally different from Rick Santorum, where maybe even a little bit different in your matchup to Newt Gingrich?
Well, Rick Santorum has spent a lot of time in Washington, as did Newt Gingrich. And in Washington, he was one of the big spenders. I mean, we sent Republicans to Washington to change Washington, and Washington changed them instead. So while Rick Santorum, for instance, was in Congress and the Senate, federal spending doubled. Right. And he voted 5 times to raise the debt ceiling without any compensating cuts in the budget being required. He was a defender of earmarks, secured billions of dollars of earmarks for his home state. Right. That's a very different record than mine. I balanced the budget every year I was governor and worked to put in place a rainy day fund of over $2 billion. So it's a big spender versus a guy who balances budgets.
Governor, National Review is calling on Newt Gingrich to drop out. Do you echo that?
I don't tell other people to get out. They have to make their own decisions. I may change my mind at some point, but right now my view is people have a right to decide how long they're going to stay in the race. And let me tell you, this has been such an up and down, mercurial kind of process. I think it's hard to predict who ought to stay in and who ought to get out.
Robert Kagan was our guest prior, and he's one of your foreign policy advisors. Speaks very highly of your knowledge and acumen in the region. I got to ask you, would President Mitt Romney commit troops or aid to the opposition in Syria?
Certainly every form of aid, short of kinetic or military aid at this stage, or military involvement, we have an enormous interest in seeing Assad removed from office. Syria is of course Iran's sole Arab ally. It is a route for Iran to the sea. It is very important for us to see a change in leadership in Syria, and we should be working in every way imaginable to make that occur, working with the Alawites in Syria to let them know that they will have a future if Assad is out of office. Right. But a whole series of things we ought to do. But I don't want to commit our forces, our military forces, into Syria at this stage.
Tell Ann to hold her ears. What are you getting her for Valentine's Day?
I got her the best gift imaginable.
Which is?
I had her take a day off and go ride some horses. So she's riding horses today.
Good job. By the way, she's a great MC for your appearances. She does a great introduction. So does your family. Governor, hope to see you tomorrow on Fox and Friends. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Brian.
It's Kilmeade and Friends on Fox News Talk.